The Institute of World Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee presents International Focus, a weekly discussion of the people and events behind today's global headlines. Support provided by Milwaukee Public Television and the UWM Center for International Education. Now here's your host, Doug Savage.
Welcome to International Focus. Commenting on the need for a comprehensive settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin once observed, "We're destined to live together on the same soil in the same land." Despite numerous rounds of talks and interim agreements, the 18 years that have followed his assassination have yet to yield peace. Now the basic framework of two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side, is being called into question. Is the two-state solution still possible? And what might the alternative look like? How would it impact peoples on both sides? Our guest today is well acquainted with the issues surrounding the conflict. Carmi Gillon is the former head of Shin Bet, Israel's internal security service, a post he held during the Oslo peace process. He also served as mayor of the city of Mavasaret Zion near Jerusalem, Israel's ambassador to Denmark, and CEO of the Paris Center for Peace. Carmi Gillon, welcome to International Focus.
Nice to be here with you.
Well, for much of the history of this conflict, the two-state solution was really a given as ultimately the solution. And as I mentioned in my introduction, increasingly it's being called into question. And there was a guest op-ed piece in the New York Times recently by a professor from the University of Pennsylvania. I'll just read you a quick quote. "Diplomacy under the two-state banner is no longer a path to a solution, but an obstacle itself." What do you think of that?
Well, I don't agree with him. I think that that's the only way to solve this issue, and from every point of view, if it's Israeli or Palestinian. And let's speak about interest. Israel wants to be a Jewish country. We have minorities, but in general, it's a Jewish state. The Palestinians have no even vision or dream that one day they are going to have the whole country. And to begin with, let's remember that that was the solution that was made by the United Nations in 1948. It was not accepted by the Palestinians or by the Arab country at that time, but it was accepted by Israel. And since then, I think both sides know very well that there is no any other solution. At the end of the day, I think we are going to have new states. The big question mark is how much we are going to pay, I mean the Israelis and the Palestinians, until we reach this point. And that's why I feel so sorry for myself as an Israeli, because I know that the booming in Israel, I mean, we have great economy, we are very good in science and high tech and all this. And after 66 years, we are a much more normal country. And the citizens of Israel are much more busy now with their own living. I mean, housing, education, like every normal American who wants to have a better life. And for sure, the only or the biggest obstacle is the fact that we can't solve the problem with the Palestinians, which is the key factor for any solution, and I would say for the existence of Israel in the Middle East.
So, your former agency, which protects the citizens of Israel, I think has done a very good job and in fact impacts this situation. I'd be curious to hear your sense of, for the average Israeli, say I'm a software producer in Tel Aviv and I leave my office and go to a comfortable apartment, and Is this much of an issue anymore? I mean, it's sort of in the background, but it's not top of mind for many people these days.
You are absolutely right, unfortunately. And I can blame our politicians for that. Let's take the last election we had in Israel. The agenda was about society, economy, things like
Cost
that.
of housing.
Housing, exactly. And it was a leftover was this political issue like the future of peace with the Palestinians. But now you see, after a few months, that even the parties that were based on that agenda, I mean the social agenda, now must to take position about the conflict with the Middle East. We can't ignore it. And if you need a reminder, I just read on my way here that John Kerry, the Secretary of State, gave an interview on the main channel in Israel, TV channel, speaking behind the head of the Prime Minister and say, you must understand you have no any other solution. Israel won't survive if you want to solve this conflict. And I absolutely agree with him. And I hope that the Israelis, that vast majority of them, around 70% supported the two-state solution, will wake up and understand that until then there will be no future for the country.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of that polling data. The concept of a two-state solution is, as you indicate, very popular, but I think that support falls off when you get to specific steps that it may require.
Yeah, but so let's speak about borders. It's the easiest thing because it's already agreed, and actually what you need now is to sign an agreement because we know what are the obstacles. One, which is not an obstacle anymore, is the border question. I think the Israelis, as the Palestinian understands very well that about 97% of the West Bank will be part of the Palestinian state. About the rest, 3%, which mean the major settlements inside the West Bank, which gives about 250,000 inhabitants out of 400,000 altogether. It's going to be an exchange of territories, and that is one issue. Second issue is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a real obstacle, but when we speak about the holy places, not about the mega city of Jerusalem. So about 100,000 inhabitants, Jewish inhabitants, live in different neighborhoods in surrounded Jerusalem. And this also accepted by the Palestinians that it should be part of the Israeli state. Speaking about the Arab neighborhoods, there are many very big Arab neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. They are already practically separated from Jerusalem. It was made by a very famous mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, who made a road that divides Jerusalem into two cities. So if you take all these parts and agree that where Arabs live, it will be Arab Jerusalem, where Jews live, it will be Jewish Jerusalem. So what we have, it's the real problem, and that the religious problem, which means Jerusalem, the holy sites of the Western Wall, of the church, of the mosques, and so on. For that, you need to be very creative. I don't know if there is a solution, but there are many proposals. For that proposal, all you need is willingness and leadership. And that brings me to the big problem that we have now, and that lack of leadership in both sides. I didn't like Arafat, whom I knew very well during the negotiation. I can assure you that late Yitzhak Rabin couldn't stand this man. He said he's a liar, he doesn't believe a word he says. but he still negotiated with him. You don't need to love your enemy. You need to find interests, common interests. That's what Rabin said. Rabin never used the word peace. He used the word good settlement for the region, as Menachem Begin made that kind of arrangement with Egypt. Many years ago, it's already 30 years that we have a silent border with Egypt, with all the uprising and all the problems there. Still, there is no Israeli army along this border, as there is no Egyptian army along this border. That is the kind of settlement we need to have with the Palestinians. But for that, you need courage. For that, you need to take the responsibility. As I may say, Ariel Sharon, our prime minister, who was the leader of the settlers in the West Bank and in Gaza for many years, took the challenge the minute he had the responsibility. And what is the responsibility of a prime minister or the president of the United States? Is to ask himself every morning what I can do to make the life of my citizens better than they were the day before. And that's what Sharon did when he decided to disengage from Gaza and to say, go to hell. You know, in Hebrew, when you say hell is Azazel, you know, like Gaza. Go to Gaza, go to hell. That's what needs to be done in Israel. Well, there is a third issue, that's the right of return, which is very important for the Palestinians. It never be accepted by the Israelis. It's mean the end of the Jewish state. I think, again, this needs a symbolic solution that can be made only by a real leader. And that's what we are looking for. We need a leader, both sides. Mahmoud Abbas is a nice man. He is against violence. That's the only credit I can give to him. On the other hand, he doesn't have enough political power to lead his people to sign the solution, unless they'll see that they're going to have better life. The same is in Israel. But in Israel, we already have better life. But a normal Israeli now is not seeking for peace because for the time being there are no terror attacks. The economy does very well. Everything moves on. And the only thing that we're really bothered is what size of the budget goes to security, which is very much, too much, okay? We just had a big discussion in Israel around it. So, if we want to have better life, and if you'll ask me later, I don't know, about more strategic issues in the Middle East, I think that for Israel, it's a window of opportunities that were just opened because of the changes in the Middle East.
Well, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Secretary Kerry, who you've mentioned, and his current efforts, and what the climate is for negotiations at this point. But first, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
By the city or?
Welcome back to International Focus. We're talking with Carmi Gillon about the two-state solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Well, let's talk a little bit about sort of the climate, if we could, for negotiations right now, starting with the current coalition government in Israel. So tell us, if you would, briefly who's in it and where they come on the ideological spectrum between very much in favor of a two-state solution to maybe not so sure.
Well, we have a very complicated government in Israel. We have a cabinet that is composed of, I would say, right-wing, center-right, center-left, and that's it, okay? The center-left moves to the left now, since Kerry began his initiative. The right-wing moved to the right, and the center-right needs to follow them. Let's divide Israel into two separate people, let's say 50-50. 50 who support, I would say, center, left, and left, that support the process, and center, right, and right that in general oppose it. But my hope is based on the center, right. The center, right means the Prime Minister Netanyahu. He is the one who agreed to move on with the process. He is the one who declared that the only solution is two states. And he has problem inside his party, in the Likud party. But still, as we know from the past, they can be much more pragmatic. So the extremists will always be extremists. But if you look into the parliament, the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, you'll find that there are quite big parties that totally support the process, like the Labour Party and Meretz, which is left. And so if, let's say, in a case Netanyahu will come to the Knesset and say, I have a settlement and that is my proposal, he would have a majority in the Knesset. Probably the very right wing will go out of the government and going to vote against it. But the majority in his party and the majority in the parliament were going to vote in favor of such an agreement, as it was when Menachem Begin came with the Camp David agreement under President Carter with Egypt. So he also had, his party was separated into two, but at the end of the day, he had the majority needed to approve such a solution. So, and more than that, I mean the Israelis. The Israelis can be now not so much interested in that, but I can assure you that an interview like the one John Kerry just gave to the Israeli main TV channel in the news, and he gave the same interview to the Israeli and the Palestinian TV channel. That would be very impressive in Israel because, as I could read via internet, he is focused on the new settlements, the fact that there are going to be another 5, the Israeli government just declared 5,000 apartments. And he said, if we'll give up, we the Americans, it means that Israel will be isolated in the free world. It means that there'll be an intifada, and other terror attacks because the Palestinians will be very frustrated. The main threat for Israel is not terrorism. That's something you need to understand. Israel is totally dependent on the outside market. The size of the Israeli market is much, much bigger than it's needed for 8 million people. So when you speak about Israeli economy, if you speak about well-being of one person in Israel, it's depend on export, it's depend on be accepted by the modern countries and also China, Russia, and so on. If the whole world will be against Israel, it's mean a disaster for our economy. And at the end of the day, the Israeli is a normal man. He wants to do the best for his children and grandchildren if he's in my age.
Well, what about, on the Palestinian side, I think there's kind of a similar dynamic where the legitimacy of the Palestinian Authority is largely based on making progress towards a Palestinian state.
Yes, but more than that, and free economy.
And so they certainly have a vested interest in seeing the process go forward. So, and as you point out, Israel has a vested interest in seeing the process go forward. But what potentially could happen, and I think you alluded to this a bit, is the process becomes more important for the individual politicians than the outcome. So as long as we're perceived as having this peace process, we can avoid making the tough choices, and we avoid the bad fate of isolation in the case of Israel and delegitimization in the case of the Palestinian Authority.
You are absolutely right. The current leaders in both sides would like to see a process, endless process. Okay? It gives them time. And for politicians, time can be very important. But there is a big but. And the question mark is United States of America. The only possible honest broker in this conflict is America. As long America try to bring both sides to decision, it works. In a matter it doesn't work, sometimes the honest broker can come with a hammer and beat the two heads and say, okay, this is my proposal, take it or leave it. But if you leave it, you leave me. I'll be out. I have American interest. As long this serve my interests, good. If not, and the Middle East facing big changes for United States. Every Israeli knows very well, as every Arab in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, that 10 years from now, America is going to be totally independent in oil. It won't depend on the Gulf anymore. This is a big issue. What would happen to the region when America will lose its interests there? And when you see what happened in Egypt now, when America says, okay, I don't want to give you the $250 million, what happened immediately? Saudi Arabia paid the check, and Putin is on his way to Egypt. And this is a situation that the moderate Arab countries and Israel, the allies of the United States, are really afraid of. So we have only 10 years left, okay, let's say. If we want to see a Middle East that two new superpowers have still interest there, and that's Russia and China, as alternative to United States, this is a brand new situation. Just to remind you, the only interest Sadat had in peace with Israel was to open the gate to the United States and to throw out the Russians or the Soviet Union at the time. And here we open the gate again for them. So if, I would say, if you are a man of wisdom, Arab or Israeli, you should know that we already reached the last moment.
Well, and for those who say the two-state solution is no longer viable, let's look for just the few minutes we have left what the alternative would be. A one-state solution would...
No, it's not acceptable. For Israel, it's disaster. The demography, it's not only a matter of security. What does it mean? It means that Israel will be divided into two nations inside one small. Don't forget that the size of Israel is about the size of Milwaukee with the suburbs, okay? So it's really nothing. And so there is no way. We can hardly live with 20% of the population who are the Israeli Arabs and have many problems with that. In spite of the fact that there is a vast majority of Jews, 80% are Jews. But when all these Palestinians will be part of Israel, I don't know. It won't work. I can assure you that my children won't stay a minute in Israel.
Well, and it would pose some very profound existential problems for Israel, would it not? I mean, if the majority soon would be non-Jewish, what does that do for the Jewish state? And to prevent...
Really, let's go back to the leaders. I mentioned Sharon. We know Rabin. Rabin, you know, his vision was not peace. His vision was how to make life better to Israel. And he was a big success because thanks to him, he cut the budget of security, invest much more in education, and now we see the fruits of his policy. But he had enough courage, in spite the fact that he didn't have a political majority. You know, only 59 members of the Knesset voted for Oslo Agreement.
Well, courage seems to be...
But he still had the courage to move on with the process.
Well, I'm afraid...
As Sharon did.
We're out of time. We'll have to leave it at that. Let's hope there'll be courage on both sides to reach a solution.
It's the only chance for Israel to survive.
Carmi Gillon, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
To our viewers, we'll see you next time on International Focus.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220 or visit us at our website,